When Japan finally surrendered at the end of World War II, the US Navy made a significant discovery that would capture the imagination of historians and naval experts for decades to come. A fleet of 24 Japanese submarines was uncovered, some of which contained technology so advanced it stunned American engineers. These submarines were transported to Cebu Bay for examination, where teams of specialists carefully inspected their design and innovations. Yet the situation soon became more complex and far more concerning when intelligence reports revealed that the Soviets had their eyes on this treasure trove of engineering marvels. The fear was clear. If the Soviets gained access to these submarines, they could harness the technology to advance their own naval forces, potentially threatening the balance of global power in the early days of the Cold War. Determined to prevent this, the US Navy devised a daring and secretive plan known as Operation Road's End. The majority of the captured submarines were taken to a remote location in the Pacific, called Point Deep 6. There, out of Soviet reach, they were fitted with carefully placed explosive charges. With one final act of destruction, the submarines were sent to the ocean floor, safely out of enemy hands and forever hidden beneath the waves. But not all of them met this fate. 4 of the submarines were spared and brought to Hawaii for further study. Among these were 2 extraordinary vessels that stood apart from the rest. These were the I-400 class submarine carriers, immense undersea war machines capable of carrying and launching aircraft, a feat that seemed closer to science fiction than reality at the time. These unique creations represented Japan's bold attempt to extend its reach across oceans in ways no other nation had fully achieved. The story of these underwater giants captures the imagination, blending history, ingenuity, and the haunting sense of what might have been had they been deployed differently during the war. Exploring history's most awe-inspiring machines, like Japan's mythical submarine aircraft carrier, has become an obsession for those who study military innovation. Today, enthusiasts can not only learn about such weapons, but also experience the thrill of commanding them in War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever created. In this digital battlefield, every detail is meticulously recreated. From the rivets on a submarine's hull, to the roar of engines in tanks and planes, War Thunder combines the excitement of fast-paced combat with the precision of historical accuracy, immersing players in a world where past battles are brought to life with breathtaking realism. Its massive arsenal includes over 2,000 carefully designed vehicles ranging from tanks and helicopters to warplanes and even naval ships. Players can decorate, customize, and adapt these machines, transforming legendary weapons of war into personal symbols of power and strategy. Through intense player-versus-player encounters, the game blurs the line between reality and imagination, offering a chance to feel the chaos and strategy of history's greatest conflicts. It is not just a game, but a time machine into a world of steel, fire, and innovation. Long before Japan's I-400 submarines came into being, the idea of combining submarines with aircraft had fascinated naval powers across the world. In the early 20th century, several nations experimented with this concept. The idea was to extend the range of seaplanes by transporting them aboard submarines, bringing reconnaissance and even offensive capabilities closer to enemy shores without needing land bases. Germany pioneered early attempts during World War I in December 1915. A German seaplane successfully flew across the English Channel and dropped bombs near London, proving the potential of such a concept. But the aircraft's limited range meant its usefulness was short. Determined to push further, German engineers planned to launch seaplanes from submarines to give them greater reach. In January 1915, the U-12 submarine secured a seaplane on its deck, carried it 30 miles, and released it to float off. The plane then took off, flew undetected along Britain's coast, and safely returned, showcasing the bold ingenuity of German naval aviation. Despite this achievement, the project faced limitations and was eventually abandoned by German Naval Command. Other nations also explored this ambitious idea. The British attempted to modify HMS E-22 to carry seaplanes, but the exposed aircraft made it vulnerable, and the inability to launch when submerged rendered the design impractical. The United States also tested the waters by purchasing German seaplanes and experimenting with them aboard the S-1 submarine. These trials, however, revealed serious difficulties with both launching and recovery. While the limited military advantages made the project unworthy of continued investment, still, the fascination with submarine aircraft carriers persisted elsewhere. The French constructed Surcouf, an underwater cruiser, complete with torpedo tubes, twin guns, and a hangar for sea. The Italians, too, built Itoll Mosca with a waterproof hangar and ordered suitable aircraft. Though the program was scrapped before the submarine was delivered and its hangar was removed. These experiments showed both the promise and the enormous challenges of merging to different fields of naval warfare. In Britain, the idea lived on briefly in the form of the M-class submarines. After the constraints of the Washington Naval Treaty and the tragic loss of HMM-1 in 1925, the Royal Navy was forced to adapt its remaining submarines. Among them was M2, which underwent a remarkable transformation. Engineers retrofitted it with a watertight hangar that could hold a small seaplane known as the Parnell Pato. By October 1928, M2 was fitted with a hydraulic catapult that allowed the aircraft to be launched directly from the submarine's forward casing. This bold adaptation represented one of the most ambitious attempts to make submarine aircraft carriers a practical reality. Although many of these early projects were abandoned or ended in tragedy, they laid the groundwork for the Japanese I-400s, the largest and most advanced examples of this extraordinary concept ever built. Asterisk. The submarine and her aircraft formed a compact, interdependent fighting system designed to extend the eyes and striking reach of a fleet without relying on distant land bases. The seaplane, with folding wings and compact control surfaces, rode in a watertight hangar built into the submarine's hull. When reconnaissance or strike missions were required, the submarine would surface, the hangar would be opened. Crewmen would unfold the aircraft's wings and tailplanes and prepare fuel and ordnance, and a hydraulic catapult would accelerate the plane off the deck runway, so it could climb away and range out ahead of the fleet. Once the mission was complete, the seaplane would alight on the water near the parent boat, be winched alongside, hoisted back aboard with a heavy-duty crane, and stowed again inside the hangar. The M2 and other experimental boats trained intensively to shorten this whole cycle. Because speed meant survivability, the faster a submarine could surface, launch or recover an aircraft, and dive again, the lower the chance of being caught by enemy aircraft or escorts. That constant drive to shave seconds off every procedure became part of the culture aboard such boats, and the crews who served on them were proud of the slick, practiced choreography required to make these complex operations look routine. Pride and routine, however, could not eliminate risk. During a routine exercise off Portland on the 26th of January 1932, the M2 submerged at 10:11 a.m. and failed to resurface. After days of searching, hope for survivors faded. By the 29th of January, the Admiralty officially abandoned rescue efforts for the 60 souls aboard. When divers finally reached the wreck, they found the hangar door open with the seaplane still inside, implying a catastrophic sequence in which the hangar had been opened, while the submarine was submerged, a tragic and baffling discovery that prompted a massive recovery effort involving dozens of divers, and more than 1,000 dives over the following months. Despite extraordinary efforts to salvage the aircraft and investigate the cause, the project proved impossible to complete, and on the 8th of December 1932, the M2 was declared lost and left on the seabed off Portland, an end that signaled the Royal Navy's retreat from this particular experiment in marrying aircraft to submarines. Asterisk, interest in the idea never completely vanished. Though, and between the world wars, other navies continued to explore different solutions. The Kriegsmarine in the late 1930s conceived a class of much larger cruiser U-boats that would carry a small Arado floatplane, and German designers developed simple rotorkites, such as the Focacciolus FA-330, that could be towed or deployed as observers from long-range U-boats. Experimental rotorcraft, like the Flettner FL-282 Calibri, showed promise as compact helicopters, but technical and operational realities limited their deployment at sea. Japan, by contrast, embraced the concept on a larger scale, investing heavily in submarine-borne aviation and building a variety of types capable of carrying 1, 2, or in the case of the Sentoku program, 3 aircraft. Japanese Type B and A boats commonly carried a single reconnaissance floatplane in a forward hangar, with boats like I-15 and I-17 demonstrating impressive speed and endurance that allowed them to operate far from home waters. A-class boats tried to expand capability by housing 2 planes, but the trade-off was often compromised underwater performance and greater vulnerability when forced to dive. Operational history proved mixed, but occasionally spectacular. Aircraft launched from submarines were used for reconnaissance and limited strikes, and a few high-profile actions demonstrated the possibilities and constraints of the concept in wartime conditions. Asterisk. The apex of the Japanese effort was the Sentoku project, which produced the I-401 and I-402, gargantuan submarines conceived to operate as underwater aircraft carriers. Each displaced roughly 6,500 tons at full load and stretched well over 120 meters in length. Their unusual figure-8 hull sections engineered to give added structural strength for a massive deck hangar. This hangar could accommodate 3 specially designed IHEM-6A Seiran attack floatplanes with wings and control surfaces that folded in several places, so the aircraft could fit into the cylindrical shelter. The Seiran was, in effect, a purpose-built submarine plane, compact but potent, capable of carrying a heavy bomb load for its size and designed to fly long distances at respectable speeds, and to ditch near its parent submarine for recovery. An I-400 crew trained to prepare and launch all 3 aircraft within a targeted window of under an hour, using powerful hydraulics and a heavy catapult on the forward deck. Once the planes were launched, the submarine's ideal tactic was to submerge quickly and let the aircraft carry out long-range reconnaissance or surprise strikes before the mothership surfaced again to recover them. To support such missions, these boats carried enormous fuel reserves and large diesel engines that delivered exceptional surface range, theoretically enough fuel to circle the globe and have range to spare, enabling plans that reached far beyond coastal raiding. Onboard defensive and offensive systems were substantial for submarines of their day. Multiple anti-aircraft mounts, a large caliber deck gun, and a battery of torpedo tubes that could employ the formidable Type 93 Long Lance torpedo. They were fitted with modern navigational aids, periscopes adapted for higher resolution observation, degaussing and demagnetizing gear to limit magnetic detection, and protective coatings intended to reduce radar and visual signature as much as possible. Asterisk. The strategic thinking behind these large submarine carriers was bold. Japanese planners envisioned using them to strike at distant strategic targets, to harass shipping lanes, and to project power into areas where land bases were not available. Schemes were drafted for long-range raids and surprise strikes that would leverage the combination of the submarine's stealth and the aircraft's reach. In practice, the war situation, logistics, and the sheer complexity of operating such platforms limited what could be achieved. After Japan's surrender, the surviving Type I-400 boats were seized and subjected to intensive inspection by Allied navies eager to extract technical lessons. The Allies ultimately decided that the maintenance burden, strategic vulnerabilities, and potential intelligence value to the Soviets made scuttling the boats the prudent course, and the I-400s were disposed of in deep water. The legacy of these programs is mixed. On one hand, they represent a high-water mark in creative naval engineering, a near-fantastical attempt to combine 2 very different technologies into a single operational system. On the other hand, they expose the practical and human limits of that ambition, from the tragic loss of crews in peacetime trials to the political and logistical realities that relegated many of the boldest plans to paper. Today, historians and enthusiasts study the technical plans, the training routines, the launch and recovery, choreography, and the surviving artifacts to understand how navies tried to push the boundaries of maritime warfare and to remember the men who entrusted their lives to machines that were as innovative as they were unforgiving. The commander-in-chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet conceived an audacious plan to strike key American cities, including New York and Washington, D.C., and to cripple the logistical lifeline that linked the Atlantic and Pacific fleets. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and Commander Yasuo Fujimori developed a multifaceted strategy that relied on stealth, surprise, and the unprecedented reach of submarine-launched aircraft. Central to the idea was incapacitating the Panama Canal's lock system to sever U.S. supply lines to the Pacific, delay the transfer of American warships, and buy Japan precious time to regroup and counterattack. Early assessments acknowledged that the canal was heavily defended on both flanks. But as the war dragged on and losses mounted, Japanese intelligence sensed that American resources were stretched thin. Interrogations of prisoners and reports from clandestine sources suggested that some defensive readiness had lapsed, and engineers believed that with careful planning, the canal's vital points could be exploited. Engineers and intelligence officers worked together to convert fragmented information into a workable plan. Documents obtained from a former canal construction worker proved priceless. Detailed blueprints and operational notes revealed structural weak points and maintenance patterns that might be exploited by a determined attacker. Technical analysis identified the Miraflores locks on the Pacific side as vulnerable to aerial attack, but the engineering team judged that a successful strike on the Gatun locks on the Atlantic side would yield far greater strategic effects because of the sheer volume of traffic and the complexity of repairs required. Calculations estimated that disabling the Gatun locks could render the canal unusable for at least 6 months, forcing ships to reroute around Cape Horn and dramatically increasing transit times and vulnerability to Allied interdiction. To make the plan feasible, the Japanese modified existing submarine platforms to carry larger air complements. Commander Fujimori secured permission to alter I-13 and I-14 so they could transport extra attack aircraft in addition to the reconnaissance planes they already carried. These and sister ships brought the available airframe count up to 10. The operation called for a risky chain of actions. The submarines would surface off Ecuadoric waters, assemble and launch their aircraft to climb to high altitude, fly across Colombia and approach the canal at dawn under cover of darkness. Strike the targeted lock gates with either conventional bombs or direct impact. Then return to a prearranged rendezvous point with the submarines for recovery and refueling. The logistics were daunting. Navigation across hostile or patrolled airspace, precise timing to catch the locks at vulnerable moments, fuel margins that left little room for error, and the need to repair and rearmed planes far from base. In April 1945, the planners made a grim adjustment, in light of dwindling resources and the desperate strategic situation. They decided that the pilots assigned to the Panama mission would employ suicide tactics, deliberately ramming the gates after arming their aircraft to maximize damage. This decision reflected both a cultural willingness to accept extreme sacrifice and a cold assessment that conventional bombing might not deliver the decisive break Japan needed. Training intensified. Aircrews practiced navigation, low and high altitude ingress and egress routes, and attack profiles on mockups. A full-scale wooden replica of the Gatun lock gate was constructed for live practice runs to train pilots in the exact angles and impact points that would cause the most damage. Crews rehearsed rendezvous procedures with the subs and drilled emergency recovery methods in case of partial mission failure. By June, the outer elements of the plan were in place, and the 4 aircraft-carrying submarines had reached their staging areas. Crews were battle-ready, and the mock attacks had been run under simulated operational conditions. Then events overtook the plan. The fall of Okinawa and the intensifying Allied bombing campaign made Japan's strategic position precarious and redirected the attention of the High Command. As American amphibious forces prepared for an invasion of the home islands, the Japanese naval staff shifted focus toward a direct, high-risk strike intended to blunt the carrier-heavy U.S. task forces that were the spearhead of the Pacific campaign. Intelligence indicated that a concentration of American carriers and escorts had been operating out of Ulithi Atoll. a major forward anchorage in the Western Pacific that by 1945 had become the staging area for enormous carrier task groups. Japanese leaders reasoned that a dramatic blow against that anchorage could hinder or delay planned invasions and possibly affect Allied operational tempo. Planned operations against Ulithi were organized in two sequenced phases. Phase 1, codenamed Hikari Light, would use I-13 and I-14 to ferry compact reconnaissance aircraft to Truk, where the planes would be reassembled and launched to overfly Ulithi and confirm enemy dispositions and readiness. Once reconnaissance validated the presence and arrangement of the carrier groups, I-13 and I-14 were to proceed to Hong Kong to resupply and take on additional ADTAC aircraft before moving towards Singapore or other forward bases for further staging. Phase 2, codenamed Arashi Storm, would see the giant I-400 class submarines, the Bitoku, boats designed specifically to operate as underwater carriers, launch multiple IHEM-6A Seiran aircraft in a low-level strike at dawn or dusk, flying under radar coverage and fighter patrols, and then attempting to hit the concentrated carrier force with high explosive ordnance or by ramming if necessary. The Seirans were designed to fold into the I-400 hangar, launch from a powerful catapult, and, in theory, be recovered at sea if the carrier surfaced again. The entire package was extraordinarily complex. Success depended on secrecy, weather, fuel reserve calculations, pilot skill, clean intelligence on enemy locations, and the element of absolute surprise. As Japan's situation became more desperate and Allied pressure mounted, the timetable compressed. Crews continued to prepare for kamikaze-style strikes, and the mindset of all-or-nothing infused planning sessions. Despite the audacity of the idea, many officers and technicians recognized the low probability of success. A strike powerful enough to alter strategic balance required near-perfect execution in the face of overwhelming Allied air and naval superiority. The political decision to continue and refine these plans reflected the tragic calculus of a nation driven to extreme measures to defend itself. Before a strike on Ulithi could be launched, Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Orders to cease hostilities and preparations were issued in the days leading to formal surrender. In the immediate aftermath, submarine crews were ordered to destroy sensitive equipment and weaponry to prevent capture, scuttle or otherwise render unusable planes, catapults, and documentation. When American forces later encountered I-400, they were astonished by the submarine's sheer scale. The boat dwarfed contemporary U.S. types, and embodied the extraordinary lengths to which Japanese naval engineering had gone in pursuit of strategic surprise. After the surrender, Allied assessment teams examined captured boats and technical documents to assess what, if any, operational lessons could be salvaged, while the I-400s and their Seiran aircraft represented impressive engineering achievements. Folding control surfaces, compact yet potent airframes, massive fuel stores, and innovative on-deck hangar arrangements. Analysts concluded that the costs and vulnerabilities outweighed the potential strategic payoff in most circumstances. The boats required vast support, were slow to prepare for action compared with carrier aviation, and their doctrine depended on surprise and low Allied awareness, conditions that were vanishingly rare. By 1945, moreover, the specter of Soviet acquisition of these technologies in the immediate post-war scramble for intelligence and assets added urgency to Allied decisions about the captured fleet. In many cases, the Allies elected to scuttle or dismantle captured submarines after extracting intelligence and technical data. Others were studied intensively, and portions of their design influenced post-war submarine and naval aviation development. The saga of these plans, from Panama to Ulithi, shows both the extraordinary inventiveness born of wartime pressure and the limits of technology. When faced with overwhelming material superiority, it demonstrates how operational desperation can produce remarkable technical solutions, and how the human cost and the realities of logistics and air superiority eventually constrain even the boldest designs. The stories of the men who planned and trained for these missions, of the pilots who practiced hitting mock gate structures, and of the sailors who maintained massive subs in distant waters, are part of a larger wartime tapestry that mixes innovation and tragedy. Thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this presentation. To explore more of the combat vehicles that shaped history, and to claim the exclusive bonus pack for new players containing vehicles, boosters and other in-game rewards, follow the link provided in the description. **